Welcome back to my examination of the cases presented in Missing 411, Eastern United States, where we are continuing where we left off at Sheepherders. There are some important points that are covered in the introduction to this chapter, which I will note here in fairness to the upcoming cases. First, sheepherders tend to be alone and far from civilization. Second, predators are attracted to these herds of sheep, and sheepherders intervene when the flock is threatened. Third, the life of a sheepherder, by its nature, is dangerous. With those caveats in mind, which I do appreciate being included in the book, let's look at the first case. Up first is Jack Wells. Jack, of an unknown age, went missing on November 5th, 1901, from Red Lodge Creek, Montana. Workers found Jack's body that was partially eaten by coyotes and had badly decayed. There was no clue as to cause of death, but law enforcement felt that there was no foul play involved. This story is taken from a news article nearly word for word. Unfortunately, the initial report was false. The actual facts read something like this. The badly decayed, eaten corpse of an unknown man turned up near Red Lodge Creek, Montana. It was discovered by hunters in the area. I couldn't find the conclusion to this, but it certainly wasn't Jack Wells, as he showed up later on in town. And there were reports of man thought to be Jack Wells, clearly is not. Next up is J. Mitchell. Mitchell, also of unknown age, went missing on January 11th, 2009 from Salmon River Breaks, Grangeville, Idaho. Searchers began looking for Mitchell after his flock was found without him. He disappeared during a heavy snowstorm. On January 17th, searchers found Mitchell's body at the bottom of a steep hill near the Salmon River Breaks. He had a broken leg, skull, and wrist fracture. There were no answers as to what happened to them. This case I take issue with, even just looking at the case presented. I mean, he went missing in a snowstorm, then was found at the bottom of a steep cliff with broken bones. Isn't the obvious conclusion that he was blinded by the snow and stepped off the edge? Let's review and see if the facts bear up our hypothesis. W.A. or W.E. Mitchell, age unknown, went missing on January 11th, 1909 from near Salmon River. While it couldn't be determined why he stepped off the cliff or fell off, it was determined that his cause of death was from falling down the cliff, possibly while caught in a landslide. Next up is Dewey Cook. Dewey, 25 years old, went missing on March 2nd, 1942, from 31 miles south of Bitter Creek, Wyoming. Cook wasn't a sheepherder. He was a scout for finding good areas for sheepherders to lead their flock. The original search lasted for about a week. There was no significant ground coverage. What I mean by that is there wasn't a lot of foliage or other blockages that would obstruct your field of view. A skeleton was found 2 years later, and dental records matched to Dewey. Let's review. His age in the newspapers was reported both as 28 and 25. To add a little bit of context, he went out with a dog and a horse, and the horse returned without him. Further, he wasn't scouting a location for sheepherders at the time. He was trying to return to Logan, Utah. There were two reasons for this given: that he was trying to report to a draft, and also that he was just trying to get home. The original search didn't start until the 6th, but yes, it lasted about a week. While that area may not have a lot of vegetation, there was a lot of snow and ice on the ground at the time. Further, there are a lot of hills, creeks, and so on as well. Vegetation is not the only thing that makes it difficult to search an area. The last point seems to be correct. Moving on to Al Owens. Al, who was 71 at the time, went missing on November 7th, 1945, from 6 miles south of Adler, Montana. There was a massive search, but he was not immediately found. His body turned up in a ravine 15 miles from where he went missing. The coroner stated that there was no foul play. Fellow sheepherders presumed that he was headed west to another town, many miles away from where he went lost. Paulides says that this is strange, considering that there were nearer towns that he could have gone to. In fact, throughout this whole section, Paulides makes a point of pointing out every time somebody got lost, saying that sheepherders, due to their job, would not get lost. I couldn't find anything about the size of the original search, but his body was found in April of 1948. And while Paulides was correct in saying that the coroner stated that there was no foul play, the coroner did go further and said that he likely froze to death after becoming lost. Up next is John Koza. John, between the ages of 50 and 60, went missing on April 26, 1950, from Acton, Montana. The company he worked for hired search dogs who went to the nearby lake and then stopped. On February 26, 1951, workers found a body believed to be John. No information is available on if it was him or on the condition of the body. Let's review. The ages I found were between 60 and 65, and he went missing on the 23rd, not the 26th. To add further context, he went out with the dog, and the dog returned without him. As for the last point, it is incorrect. The body was positively identified as John. His body was found in a, quote, natural sleeping position, close quote, under some sagebrush. Up next is Jerry Garcia. Jerry, of unknown age, went missing on August 12, 1956, from, and I'm sorry if I mispronounce this, Cocoino, Arizona. The owner of the ranch Jerry worked at reported him missing. As of August 14, 1956, searchers have been unable to find Jerry Garcia. This is the first time that Missing 411 has specified something like that last line. Let's see if there's a reason for that. I was able to find his age, he was about 39. But let's look at this last point. It is technically correct. See, it turns out that there was a reason for the as of August 14th disclaimer. Jerry was found alive, lost, and suffering from exposure on the 17th of August. The fact that Mr. Paulides puts in a disclaimer of as of August 14th makes me wonder if he knew something about Jerry being found and just chose not to report it. I think that if that is the case, that's actually worse than completely missing it. That is a breach of journalistic integrity rather than just sloppy research. Up next is John Davis. John, who was 72 at the time, went missing on August 26, 1956, from Burbank, Washington. John's employer reported him missing. The search lasted for 2 weeks, but they couldn't locate him. In February 18th of 1957, his body was found under the snow in a field. An article from Walla Walla Union on February 19th, 1957 said, quote, "Officers said that Davis's clothes were in a pile near his body," close quote. There's no foul play suspected in this case. Mr. Paulides notes that he does not understand how John's clothes came off of his body. I need to quote this section or it's going to sound sarcastic. Quote, "It should be noted that John Davis disappeared just 14 days after Jerry Garcia vanished in Arizona. Is that a coincidence?" Close quote. Let's review. I couldn't confirm all the points, but many of them were correct. As for not understanding how his clothes came off his body, it seems like Paulides does not understand or has never heard of paradoxical undressing. That last point, it just blows me away. Are these two completely separate and unrelated disappearances a coincidence? Yes, obviously, especially since one person returned alive and well and the other one died. Up next is Frank Mean. Mr. Paulides notes that Frank Mead might be his actual name. He was 55 at the time and he went missing on April 21st, 1966, from 25 miles west of Thermopolis, Wyoming. Law enforcement checked the surrounding hills and couldn't find him. Let's review. Even these very short cases presented in Missing 411 can have inaccuracies in them. Frank's body was found on the 23rd of April from an apparent heart attack. He was known to have a history of heart trouble. Up next is Albert Cucupa, also known as Albert Charlie. Albert, who was 32 at the time, went missing on February 16, 1960, from Zuni, New Mexico. The area was just hit with a heavy snowstorm, and searches consisting of tribal police searched for 9 days but only found Albert's sheep. Let's review. This is a rare instance where I could find absolutely no information beyond that Albert Cucupa of the Zuni tribe seems to be a real person. He appears on a 1940 census, but I can't find any further information besides that Albert Cucupa was likely 35, not 32. I don't mean that there aren't newspaper articles, I mean that I wasn't able to find any online sources besides census records and a possible draft record. Since I can't comment on the validity of this entry, I'll give Missing 411 the benefit of the doubt and assume that the source was something I wasn't able to pull up. Up next is Louis Sandoval. Louis, who was 66 at the time, went missing on September 6th, 1969 from Fremont City, Dewey, Idaho. Louis's horse returned without him. A search was conducted by Fremont County Sheriff C.A. McDougal. Louis was never found. Let's review. Louis went missing on the 31st of August, not on the 6th of September. Further, he was found on the 7th of September. He was walking back to the company that he works for. Up next is Greg Lewellen. I want to read the intro to this case because I think it gives us a look at how Mr. Paulides feels about the cases he presents in Missing 411. Quote, "It's always good to end a chapter on a strong story. This is definitely a very strange story." Close quote. Good to know that he isn't adversely affected by looking into these cases, which he previously implored us readers to remember are lost human lives. Moving on. Greg, who was 66 at the time, went missing on August 3rd, 1973, from Bench Creek, Utah. Greg had been on vacation and was reestablishing his campsites. On August 4th, friends who were visiting realized that he was missing from the camp. They searched the area and found his flashlight 250 yards away in the middle of the field. The dishes were not done, and his bed was unmade. Both dogs were missing. One of his horses was hobbled, a restraint on the legs that ties them together, and the other was tied to a tree. 3 days later, his dogs returned to camp. Llewellyn was never found. There's a section here where Paulides puzzles over the possibilities and opines that he was abducted, but he does give us 2 more pieces of information. That his firearm was under his bedroll, and that there was no blood at the campsite. Let's see what passes as a strong case by Mr. Paulides' standards. While I wasn't able to confirm all the points, I was able to find some things that didn't quite line up. There were 3 horses that were hobbled, and 1 that was tied to a tree. As for the point of Llewellyn never being found, his body was found on August 18th, 1973 by a hunter, 3 miles above Bench Creek in Moon Canyon. They don't make mention of foul play or the state of the body, but there doesn't appear to be any follow-up articles that would have suggested foul play. So, here we are at the end of the chapter. What is the accuracy of the book up until this point? It looks like the totals have fallen from 32% to 29%. That's all I have for you today. Please join me next time when we start the next chapter, this time looking at North American missing farmers. Until then, take care.